Greetings, fellow Empyreans. I am Ashrothi, and this is the Eve Universe Show's continued coverage of the CSM 16 with our interviews, this time with Angry Mustache. How you doing, Angry Mustache? AM, what do I call you?
Any combination works. I've heard everything from everyone.
All right, Angry. How you doing?
Fine, thank you. On this evening, assuming you're in the United States the Western Hemisphere.
This goes on YouTube. It is timeless. We are everywhere and nowhere at the same time. All right, but we don't have all of the time in the world, so let's get started with the rules. We will. I have 50 minutes to explore the candidacy with the candidate. I will ask questions and perhaps challenge viewpoints in order to better understand the candidate and why my viewers might be interested in voting for them. After I have 50 minutes, I will give them a 10-minute warning in which he can have more control over the conversation and make sure that there's any other points that they may want to come across or drive home, whatever. And when we are both satisfied, we will wrap it up, send it over to YouTube where it goes onto the playlist with all of the others. So that way you can watch them all and become an informed viewer or voter, because that's what's important. An informed electorate, because that is what makes an effective CSM, which is one of the best tools that we have for feedback and communication with CCP. So to that end, Angry Mustache, what is your history with the CSM?
I actually have run once for the CSM before. This was like back in 2013. But at that time, I was a college student and thus very stupid. So I thought I had a chance when I really didn't. But that failure actually taught me something very important, which is to always keep things in perspective. So, for example, I believe on that run, I received like 230 votes, which was I think the 10th least behind. Like I got less votes than Zenuria in that one. So, but that also did teach me to have a more honest appraisal of myself and what I can do and how much popular support I actually have. This is the first CSM that this is the first CSM I decided to run for after coming back to the game about 2019. So in the 6 years since, I've become older, I've gotten a job, graduated, and have some work experience that I think may be applicable to making me a more effective CSM. And that work experience is for my day job. I'm a business analyst at our company does. I'm a business analyst for a company that we have certain needs, and mainly I deal with primarily market research and financial analysis.
Okay, so you came back in 2019. Now, I really want to key in on this. I know you've got a lot to talk about, but you are in the Imperium, which means that you're probably null block-ish. So far, every null block person I've talked to has had nothing but terrible things to say about Blackout, some more spicy than others. Blackout's why you came back, or when you came back at the very least.
Why I came back. I thought that would be interesting.
So help me out here. Are you going to lose the entire null block vote just by? Do you like Did you think that Blackout was a good thing?
I was ambivalent on it. I personally was not terribly affected by Blackout, but I could understand people that were. I could understand people who really enjoyed it. Like at Vegas, I met Alexis of Card, if you're familiar with him, and we had a short chat over why his group, Noir Mercenary Group, really liked Blackout for like the first 2 weeks. And then sort of Blackout's sort of emblematic of what of a lot of what CP has done, which is that it has the potential to be really, really good, but they missed out on the details and then ended up being quite not having the effect they actually wanted. So if you want my 30-second pitch on Blackout, is that Blackout had the potential to reshape the nullsec economy in a healthy way, because I don't believe local is a healthy state for Intel. But what CP failed to realize is that by including a risk increase with no reward increase at the same time, they've really drastically shifted the balance of what people are willing to do, and that ended up actually, uh, if you have this, if you can imagine this environment of gazelles and cheetahs, so to speak, the gazelles died out, and there was nothing for the cheetahs to eat, and that was really sort of the tragedy of Blackout, is that the people who were most clamoring for it ended up being the most hurt by it, because the people they wanted to kill could do the risk reward analysis themselves and decided that the reward was not worth it.
The
That is like the crux of Blackout.
the tragedy of the blackout, like the tragedy of the commons. I like it. Over farming equals underpopulation. It's a true point. It's salient, and I think that it's useful to have somebody who is in nullsec that can see nuance do things like blackout, because I think that there is a lot to learn about that. But so but you really stood out in your CCP interview with the for the CSM, partially because you were the only one really that came like prepared with a legitimate presentation. I think it kind of blew a lot of people's minds and whatnot. But I saw it as you taking it seriously, and I kind of wanted to discuss some of those topics with you. But part of the problem was that you got a whole bunch of exploration or explanation of the situation done, but I don't feel like we got to really like wrestle in on what to do, what the problems are, and you know what the effects are. So if you don't mind, I think that we should probably dig into that topic a little bit.
Sure thing. We've got 50 minutes instead of 10, so we've got time to
Exactly.
go do anything
Exactly.
that
I
we
think I
want to
even
talk
said that
about.
in the chat. I was like, man, I at least I'm going to have an hour to follow up with this stuff, because this is by the way, spoiler alert, you know, the Convocation of Empyreans, being a high sec empire, has been very much involved in the industry changes, and we have favored greatly for it. But so let's get started. The name of your presentation is why does Eve has no subcontractors, and I'm just going to quickly summarize a little bit, and then you can fill in any pieces or whatever. But from my understanding of your argument, like, so as you said, like all these different people, all these different organizations put together the pieces that then get put together for the airplane, and Eve doesn't have that kind of system where, you know, there's the people that build the airplanes, but there's nobody who builds the cockpits for airplanes for Boeing in this sense. Is that basically the short of it?
Yeah, that's basically the short of it, and you can sort of tell by looking at the market volumes for ships, for example. If you go to JITA right now and you look at the market volume for all Mimitar T2 ships, it is trillions and trillions and trillions. But if you go look at the same volumes for Mimitar Tech 2 components, it is nothing. It is like 100 billion tops, which means that the vast majority of parts that people use to build Tech 2 ships with, they either build themselves, or they have or they buy it from their local alliance market, and there's sort of no open market for parts that you see through GG. Like even the people I know that aren't like serious vertically integrated, they still do a majority of the production themselves, and there's like maybe one or two components or composites that they get from the market.
But isn't those one or two components like, this is the thing that like struck me, is that like you keep saying, why aren't there subcontractors, regardless of whether or not it's popular? Like, isn't that what the market is? Now hear me out. One of the things that concerned me about the argument that you were saying was about like bigger versus smaller, right? In fact, on this presentation here, you're talking about the size of the different things and which piece within T1 and T2 production, right? But the thing is that like this composite section right here, like, isn't created equal. You
It
have
is
the
not. There are dense ones and not dense ones, but
right,
sort of the issue here is that when you look at the composites, right, it's the I guess the correct would be it's the bulky composite that determines where final assembly is done. For
right.
example, the list out of here is phenolic composites and ceramic fibers. These two anchor production of T2 in null sec, because if you try to ship this from a place where you can do reactions to high sec, you get murdered on the shipping costs.
Right. And I get that. And that's why I think that like what the industry changes was so brilliant about this, because ultimately this T1 component that's here isn't just a T1 component. It's the fact that these composites start big, and there actually is a stage, reinforced carbon fibers, which are designed to be much smaller, and that this is that final product, the reinforced carbon fiber. There's like 3 or 4 subcomponent products, and so it looks very complicated in the reactions process. But really, it's R4 moon goo and fuel blocks in, output RCF. And so, in that sense, the Convocation of Empyreans is a subcontractor. We don't produce. I don't produce Tech 2 battleships or even Tech 1 battleships like that, or on the scale. Like, we do some, but we produce far more RCF because we've been mining R4 moon goo for over a year. So we take that to market, we sell it to people, and then they export it out. How is that not subcontracting? Help me understand how you can improve the situation.
But I'm going to say that what you're doing is a small fringe of the business, and the vast majority of the business or the industry is dominated by vertically integrated groups. And to use that specific example, and there's another one, pressurized oxidizers, also very, very dense. No doubt some of your group may also work on that. But pressurized oxidizer and reinforced carbon fiber are very, very cheap portions of the whole process. So when I was looking at the bill of materials for a Varga, right, that bill of materials is around, let me double check, around 1.2 billion at the moment. Let me just make sure I'm not making a fool out of myself.
I see. Yeah, you kind of go into it a little bit more right here too.
Okay, right. But so looking at the materials right now, the two that are the one you mentioned, reinforced carbon fibers, is around 1% of it, and then pressurized oxidizers is another 0.5%. So it's not much in the grand scheme of things. And when you look at, actually, in terms of composites, probably a better example, which is carbides and fermionic condensates, which are both dense and used much more heavily than the other two. But it's sort of like, I'm trying to think of the correct way to say this, is that sort of like your group of people is relegated to the fringes, so to speak, of industry. I don't know whether you would agree with that, because it is your business, but when you look at the total volume of Tech 2 that goes through JITA and think about how much does the Convocation of Empyrean add into the JITA market, it's not that big.
Right, and I'm not saying like look at how cool and awesome we are, but my point was is that you were saying we need subcontractors in the game, and I'm like, but like the market is totally functioning in that capacity. The fact that people aren't doing it isn't because they can't do it. If someone wanted to be a subcontractor, they could be. So what is actually the real problem here, and how do we fix it? How is this not just like people are solving the problems how they want to? Maybe they're doing it with individual deals that we can't necessarily monitor. Maybe there is vertical integration, and therefore there's rewarding. There's different reasons to do it different ways. Like, where does the problem start, and what do we actually need to do about it?
So the problems, well, this kind of ties into the question you asked at the beginning. It's like, what are your solutions for this? And my question, my statement before that is, well, the solution is actually going to be whatever CCP wants the goal to be. So there are a dozen solutions to this problem, or even saying it's not a problem at all, it's fine, deal with it. But ultimately, what matters is what CCP thinks the end result should be. And from just my observations of the CCP stream and CSM streams, like from Kenneth Feld, is that I think that CCP wants to make stepping into profitable industry easier for newer players and smaller groups. So if you browse our Eve, like every couple weeks, you'll get like a question from some newbie that asks, "Hey guys, I just heard of Eve Online. I don't know. I want to be a space industrialist. What do I build?" And the answer is nothing, because T1 is not profitable.
Right.
And anything that's profitable, you don't have access to.
Yeah. Well, go
on. And that's sort of, I mean, that is the truth, but it's a very bad answer to give to a new player that says, if you want to chase your dreams, please wait for X years,
Right.
or please join Block X, or blah blah blah. Now there are some niches that are actually low capital, relatively low skill, and still profitable. Specifically, Tech 2 rigs for small and medium hulls is one of them. But the issue with that is that to make money off of that, you need a lot of market knowledge, which a newbie usually also doesn't have. There's
Right.
not like, there's if you want to make like a real life analogy, it's like the guy who starts out making fasteners for Ford, and then he uses the fastener money to, now I make hubcaps for Ford,
Right.
now I make wheels for Ford,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and now I'm an actual business, and soon enough I'll build my own car because of my because I've been able to grow my business and accumulate expertise. And in EU sort of starts out the other way around, whereas that until you either join a, well, I'm gonna say the easiest way for someone to begin industry right now is to join a block, because a block has all the things you need. They have the structures for you. You don't have to pay them. You don't have to do whatever. You can hit the ground with some capital and start making money, but like having the default answer be join a block is not a great answer.
Sure. Which is, I mean, it might, I believe, is the entire point of the industry changes. Like it helps create new niches. It makes new avenues that are a little bit simpler than T2 to grow into, but still allow space for people to have an answer on a T1 level. Do you agree with that?
I agree that that is the goal, and it's a good. And I agree that it's a goal that's good to have. I don't think many new niches have opened up to enable that.
Well, we understand this is
Now,
stage one, so there. I mean, like there
yes,
could be
this is
more.
stage one.
Right. So
Sort of the reason I'm running for CSM is that I don't think their mechanics in stage one have necessarily tied up with their goals for stage one. I kind of sort of want to provide CP with a kind of information that will make stage two industry actually do what CP wants it to do.
right. Okay. So back to that subcontractor thing. So like with T2 takes a ton of different components, and so like the common wisdom is trying to get all of the stuff together to do a T2 thing, especially from like resource acquisition point of view, is they take specific moons about from different like places, and it's just complicated. Each race type has their own shield emitters and all of this stuff. Triglavians get even weirder because they mix two different races stuff together. So like there's a whole level of complexity that's designed to make it so that if you're in T2 doing T2, unless you are part of a big block, you would buy those secondary components, shield emitters, plates, etc., off of the market to then go and build your T2. You're suggesting that's not happening. Why? Clearly, T2 is being built. Is people not building T2 without having vertical integration? Why wouldn't people be?
I'm going to let me give you some statistics, right? So, for example, I do T2 production. I do all four races, and I go from goo, ore, and ice to finished product.
Mm-hmm.
So right now I'm looking at my spreadsheet, and if I build let's just use the Varger example, right? If I build a Varger, my bill of materials is 1.4 billion, and a Varger sells for 2 billion.
Mm-hmm.
That's a healthy profit margin, 40%. Now, if I change it so that instead of doing my own reaction, instead of building the components myself, I buy the components off the market. Just give me 1 second to get you a number.
Mm-hmm. I will say, just to respond to chat while you're looking that up, on the subject of T1 profitability, I haven't looked recently, but back when I used to do stuff for years, even when it was difficult to find anything profitable in T1, fuel blocks are always a pretty good way to, like literally I used to just buy the mats in Dodixie, take them 2 jumps over, build them, and then bring them back and throw them up on the market. And it was just profitable with no other considerations. And anything you can start harvesting yourself makes it just better. We are never going to run out of need for fuel blocks, man.
Okay, I'm back.
Yeah,
And
go on.
if you buy the components off the market, your bill of materials is 1.8 billion.
Right. Well, but
So there's a profit there. Now the question is, if you ship that, because I was using the numbers from a low sec, slash null sec engineering complex. If you do it in high sec, you lose some material efficiency. But if you do it in null sec and low sec, you're dealing with a seventh of a jump freighter.
oh,
But the difference is so big between 40% margins and 10% margins that if that if I want to, I can change my I can put my list my vargers at 1.7 and you make no money.
right. So yeah, vertical integration is efficient. Like that's the point. But that doesn't mean it's not subcontractors are existent. Like what? Where's the
Well,
problem in
I
that?
want to make vertical integration less of an advantage. So you can start out with a
Okay.
small slice of the pie and get into the business as, say someone like, I make, I make nanomechanical processors because that's what my 100 million ISK allows me to do, what my one character allows me to do.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm going to make my nanomechanicals and put them on market, and people will actually buy them in numbers because vertical integration is not as much of an advantage anymore.
Tracking. And it is also true that part of the problem is that there are people buying at all stages, right? So when it comes to people that are building T2, there are people who are buying the shield emitters, but then there are people that are actually just buying the goo to then react or buying the final reaction product to turn into shield emitters. So there's like 3 different stages that people could be injecting themselves into the process and taking it the rest of the way from there, which I'm sure confuses the whole matter greatly on the market. But so let's talk turkey then. Like let's let's accept the fact that vertical integration is important, but maybe too easily accessible right now. How would we fix that and
Oh,
reward?
how do we fix that sort of? Okay, sorry if I cut you off, but
Yeah,
so there's a lot of things, but this presentation, for example, looks at one example, which is that Eve has the counterintuitive interaction is that as you build, things get bigger. Whereas if you think from at least
there'd be
until the very
waste.
end, at least until the very end, as you build, things get they don't necessarily get small. I mean, sometimes they get smaller, sometimes they get bigger, but the end products all the smallest stages are always the end product and the raw materials, with some exceptions for Tech 3.
And you call that
Um,
counterintuitive because it should go from like bulk and then refine down, refine down. Each
right,
step has waste. It should get smaller and smaller.
right. It should get smaller and smaller, and you can sort of see that in other aspects of the industry, which is PI. So PI starts out P1 is very big, P2 is smaller,
Right.
P3 is smaller, P4 is around the same as P3, but it varies. And what you can sort of see in PI is that people sell PI in all stages, and it's very normal for someone doing PI to source PI from other stages into their own chain, which is not what you, which is, I think that's predominant, whereas people sourcing components and Moongoo from outside sources into their T2 chain is not predominant. And sort of the reason why that is that PI does get smaller at every stage of the process, whereas industry does not. So if you just go in and change the volumes of composites and components so that every step is actually a compression of the previous step, you'll make it efficient. Well, you'll make it more price competitive for someone to actually just buy, components from Jita, because and this applies also especially to the bulkier parts of the bulky components. For example, all the Tech 1 components that go into a Tempest, they are big as hell. You see that number there, 17K. All of that combined is less than like 30 mil, like it's like 30 to 40 mil if I remember correctly. That stuff, you build that can only be built and used in the system that you build, do your final assembly in, because it's like loading up your jump freighters with liquid ozone. It's you're wasting more fuel to move your jump freighter than what you're carrying is actually worth.
So what you're saying is that by making it get smaller and smaller, then you increase the likelihood that people will stop at an intermediate step and simply take it to market to be picked up by a different person to take it to the next step.
Yes.
And that it's not being taken to market because it's too bulky in its current state, like in a Moongoo or early reaction state, and therefore either you're out where it's done, or there's just the market is bad for it. So like even if I wanted to go on the market and buy the components to build an Ikitursa, it might be hard for me to buy the pieces to build it because no one's selling them.
People do sell them. They sell them at large markups because
Right.
when you're doing that, what you're actually buying is the convenience from, oh crap, I didn't plan, I'm missing a component, and then
Right.
you get
Not
reamed
that
on the
nobody
thing.
sell it,
Right.
but the nobody
Right.
sell
But
you pay the nobody selling them
the
fee.
market depth is the market is very thin. It's not very deep.
And to that credit, I will say that I have had problems filling orders, not just paying for them, but there are several T2 components. I haven't had to do it since in the last year or so that much, but when I have actually tried to like aggressively fill buy orders with stuff as I'm building like a bunch of Ikitursas or whatever, they are on the harder end of things to fill because it's not just a matter of being willing to pay the price, but whether or not somebody's there selling them at the time. So it's a volume issue as well. And so you may actually be very well speaking to something on that. Is this something that like, but when you start saying that there needs to be subcontractors, are you suggesting that there needs to be some sort of like UI where like, because this is something that people have been thinking about before, where it's like
I don't know.
you can like dig into it. You can put in an order for something.
I haven't thought of well, I mean, if you were looking at it that way, buy orders already exist, and you can use buy orders as a way of signaling that you want something. But the issue with that is CCP nuked margin trading. So
Right.
people are very skittish with buy orders because if you want to put up a buy order for something, it's a very large liquid sink, and if someone outbid and with and it's and that does make people more hesitant to make market signals.
Yeah.
Sort of
Sure.
like we can sort of ignore. I sort of saw this in 1DQ, which is our hub, which is after the margin trading change, you had a lot less people willing to put up buy orders for Moongoo, and that's because um, liquid is a limiting factor, and the shorter time you have your buy orders up, the better utilization of liquid that you have. Now, if you put up your buy order in a secondary hub like 1DQ versus JITA for Moongoo, that buy order is going to sit there for a while because the velocity is not nearly as high in a hub that's not named JITA.
Right. So again, to kind of just summarize, when you say that Eve needs to add subcontractors or whatever, you're not
I'm not
asking.
saying
This isn't
Eve
like a
needs subcontract. I'm saying CCP wants Eve to have
right.
subcontractors. This is why we don't have them.
Right.
If you want them, here's some steps that can help.
This isn't creating a new role. This is dissecting where the design is kind of failing to create the effect that might be desirable. Is what you're trying to
Correct.
say? Yeah.
Correct.
Okay. So to that end, I mean, like, I think that you might be onto something. First of all, you clearly have done the homework for it. I think that also it could be very fair to say that like this goes back to an Eve is a learnable game kind of situation. I don't think that people even know where to even slot into these kinds of things. Like if I wanted to start making field emitters, I wouldn't know why I would want to start making it or how to start making it or anything like that. If I wanted to start pulling things apart and figuring out my construction path and who I might want to talk to provide these kinds of things, I don't have these capabilities. Do you think that this is simply a market balance issue where if you just put the numbers, eventually people will figure it out and it'll just start working like magic? And if we just align the M3, then we'll start seeing a lot more of this positive behavior? Or do you think that there's another level to this where people should understand where the stages might be?
There's definitely a lot of institutional knowledge that someone needs to learn before they can really start being effective. And we sort of have a program for that where we urge everyone in Goonswarm to at least dabble in reactions and make carbides because If you're talking about, because as it is right now, carbides are one of the best partial systems to get into for industry making money, because carbides have three desirable properties for allowing a small time producer to make carbides, is that they compress. So like carbides actually are smaller than the blocks in the goo. They're high usage, so people need a lot of them, and they're actually not slot efficient. So big producers, actually, we had in Goonswarm, well, before the war, we had big producers making contracts with people to specifically buy carbides, because the big producers have limited character slots and they don't want to waste their slots on something as low is per hour as carbides, so they subcontract that out.
So you just hit something that I was going to already talk about, which is that Valamir in the chat points out that one of the biggest things holding subcontracting back is the rampant use of alts. If I
Yes.
don't need other people to do my job for me because I am Legion, then yeah, vertical integration becomes really really easy. Do you think that tackling alt issues would be a way to do or is necessary to fixing this issue, and how would you even begin to try to address that? You're not going to tell people
So
that they can only have so many alts.
of course not. But sort of the thing with why in real life why contractors became a real big thing, that you'll see, like, everyone has TSMC do their chip production, is because TSMC is so much better at everyone else, and because they specialize, they can be ahead of everyone else. Now that's not really possible in Eve, except in one aspect, which is very specialized skills. So, for example, so Kenneth Fell can brag he's built like a dozen Titans. I've only built one Titan, but at the point where I have all my Titan parts, I did not have a single character that had Capital Ship Construction 5. So I had to go find someone to actually who had Capital Ship Construction 5 to put my Titan together. Now, parts of this are actually coming through in the capital ship patch, because you'll see in the new capital components, a bunch of them require science fives, and a lot of science fives. Like, we mapped out that if you have a current bare bones capital ship construction character, you need like a year of int mem to train all the skills for that character to be all capital parts capable again. Now that there is some space for specialization,
Right.
because if you need three science fives, that's like 2 months of training. Someone might be able to say, no, I'll train into capital shield emitters, and then X person trains into um capital thrusters and
Right.
whatever,
I
and
have to
then
train into
they trade
this.
parts back and forth.
I
Now
have
the
to
issue
train
with
into
this is
this, but I only
the
compete
skill
against
gate
other
only
people.
lasts for so long. The
Right.
skill gate only lasts for so long. Eventually, everyone's gonna have science five.
Right. So
But
that's my. I just wanted to
yeah,
drill home on that point. So yes, I have to now train this skill, but by doing so, I'm only competing with other people that train that skill. But that only is so good for so long, and as the game matures, more and more people are de facto going to be competing in these different fields. Sorry, go on.
yeah, that is sort of the thing. I mean, the other thing I kind of think of is, I think CCP might be looking at it as well. CCP was talking about system specialization in their some of their present speeches, and unfortunately, this is something that apparently only applies to nullsec, which is that they want nullsec groups to be able to specialize their system. So what if, as part of your specialization, you have a system that is modified by the iHub to do something more efficiently? You have a system
Right.
that's modified by the iHub to do something else more efficiently, but that is going to be far in the future. So we haven't even seen what they plan to do with the resource specializations, what they talked about first.
So one of the things you talk about is reducing taxes and broker fees. What about to the mind of like making not all products equal? We kind of have a complex tax code in the real life, partially in order to
Right.
deal with a
To
complex
do
business
this.
situation. Could it be possible that there should be bulk products that have different tax rates than other products to allow certain stages to be more tradable?
I don't think that's necessarily a good idea, because Eve is you don't want to hide these sort of hidden information things that make Eve even less accessible to people, which is like, oh, by subsection B, paragraph 3, capital components only have a 1% sales tax, and then people just zone out completely.
You don't think we need
But
that? Oh man, that is so not Caldari of you. All right, go on.
but I think just from a healthy economy point of view, if you do any reading into public policy, is that it's always repeated. Sales tax is the worst type of tax because it disproportionately impacts the people least able to pay it. And then, but however, it is also the easiest to implement. That's in real life, and I actually think that applies to Eve as well. Sales tax is the worst type of tax to collect if you're looking to sink ISK, but it is the easiest to implement.
All right. You also say that you want to re-implement margin trading. Margin trading was largely removed because it was largely seen as little more than a scam, that people would put up orders that they never intended to fill, so that way when somebody bought, like, say, an officer mod somewhere else because they saw like a really good deal, then they went to go try to fill your order. It
It
failed. They're
wouldn't
holding the
go through.
bag.
Yeah, I did get margin scam on my first time
Yeah.
around when I was in Eve Uni, but
And a
as
lot of
I
people, well, a lot of people see that, like when they think of margin trading, they think of that. But margin trading was used by a lot of people to hold a lot of market positions and whatnot. So how do we regain the value that we lost in margin trading as a skill and a function within the game without reintroducing the bullshit scam?
my very long term, my pie in the sky dream is enforceable loan contracts. So if you need liquidity, you actually borrow it from another player, and it's not, and you do it in a way that the contract is enforceable with collateral. But
How?
that's a lot of work for CCP to implement. So
Okay.
the straight answer is I don't know. It depends on what CCP thinks is doable. But if you actually, when I was reading back like the early ME, not even MERs, the quarterly economic reports when Dr. Ijog was still working at CCP, one thing he says is that Eve has very low, um, Eve has very low credit available. Is that
Right.
because the game is everyone versus everyone? You don't loan money to anyone except people who you can physically punch if they don't pay you back.
Historically, banking institutions have been very bad in EVE Online, in both directions.
Yes, in both. Yes, but sort of the problem with that, right, is that without banking, without some sort of banking, we Eve, monetary wise, is living in a pre, basically in a pre-modern society because because you basically don't have credit.
But shouldn't the trust be established by us? I mean, wouldn't it be? Isn't it a violation when CCP like enforces trust via
A
systems?
contract. Well, I mean, we're immortals who suffer no consequence for anything. So under that kind of situation, how can you trust anyone? The answer
But I
is,
mean,
well, you
like,
can't.
so. But argue the point that it would be better off to have a system that guarantees compliance for something like a loan contract, as opposed to just saying like, hey, if you're trustworthy, then you can be trusted, and that's valuable. And if you can't, then it's not. Trust is overpowered, and therefore enforced trust is unbalancing. So, uh, like, help me understand why that, like, it's important to allow that, and would there be any problems that emerge from that?
Like I said, it's like a pie in the sky thing, but sort of like the maturation of financial institutions is to a real world nerd is something that's interesting to me.
That's
We
fair.
kind of saw a bit of that in the war bonds that our alliance has issued. I mean, I think it's an immense sign of trust that our alliance members were able to throw, willing to throw tens of trillions at us on basically our word. But you know that kind of thing, not necessary. I don't think it's really widely applicable in Eve.
Right. Well, I have several people in the chat right now that would happy to take a loan and double your ISK for you. And from my understanding, they're completely trustworthy. So it's a solid plan if you're into it. But I wanted to look at kind of a little bit more of your platform. Like, you are in the Imperium. There's a whole bunch of baggage that come along with that, and a whole bunch of good things with that. There's a B
No
in between
doubt.
you and me. The Imperium have a lot of people uh, running this year, as they do every year. We've talked to several of them about this and the interest in Karma Fleet and being active in the community and all that kind of stuff. I don't think I even need to ask the question of why you're not a Noble candidate, or like what you have that these other candidates don't, because you came in here with a spreadsheet. You proved it better than anybody else could have with their words. So I'm not even worried about that. But let's speak to the non-Imperium candidate, the non-nullsec candidate, and maybe even like the candidate that is not the candidate, but sorry, the voter who maybe less than a year in the game at this point. So not only is this their first time running for CSM, but they have never seen a universe outside of this war. They only know about the Imperium from the perspective of the propaganda and all that kind of stuff. Help them understand that you, Angry Mustache, can be their representative, and you're not just like the Imperium stuffing the ballot.
Sure thing. I can say that the reason I ran the CSM was essentially from the position of a concerned citizen, so to speak, in that I saw what CCP was doing with the economy, with resources, first with Blackout, then with scarcity, then with a bunch of other, I think, fairly poorly thought out changes. And now I see that they started implementing the second phase of it, but what's coming out of there is not terribly encouraging to me either. So I think they are, if it's not incompetence of some way, they are lacking someone who can actually give them useful feedback insofar as the economy and industry goes. And I believe, and I hope I can prove, there's no one running this year that can do it better than me. That's basically my primary pitch. I was not endorsed by the Alliance to run. I started running and then was reached out to see if I wanted to be part of the Alliance ticket. When I started,
Excellent.
I had no guarantee I was even on there.
Right. And honestly, I don't like I said, my assumption is that, the null blocks have their null block, like guys that are going to vote by the null blocks, they have their stuff covered. I'm not talking to them. You're not talking to them when you come on here. So we're talking to all of the other people. So we're trying to figure out whether or not they have a reason to vote for you, whether or not you want to reach out to them. And I'm giving I think it's important to give you a fair shot in that, because it was worth your time to come out here and talk to them. So and I think that like you do have a very compelling argument, because this is big tier stuff. And the thing is that like even in the fact that we asked in the conversation that we just had, what is important. Oh, by the way, we're getting really close to our 10-minute warning. So I'm kind of wrapping up my thoughts on the matter, but I think that this is, as we deal with this like ecology updates, and the new Eve starts to kind of emerge out of this. I think that you and I both agree that the overall design of this new universe that's kind of coming out of this is really good, but like it's the devil's in the details, man. It's all in the numbers, and there's little things like what you pointed out that can be the difference between it being flat or transcendent. And so I think that is a critical piece of that, to understand not only the industry side of things and the what does each section kind of represent. We've put a lot of focus on making sure each area of space has their own thing that's worth doing and provide for the rest of the economy. But maybe there hasn't been quite enough look at the actual act of interchange between those spaces through the markets. And in particular, there was, on top of everything else, some very heavy-handed changes in the market during the last year, enough that CCP's definitely experimented with the market and whatnot, enough that it makes you know that nobody really has the firm answer right now. So having somebody like you, who's digging through the numbers, who is on the CSM, and so maybe can work with CCP devs that might not be willing to work with the public-facing side of things, and work with numbers that maybe the CSM or the average population can't necessarily have access to. You're able to give them advice, and there's 10 slots, and we need a lot of different voices, and I think that your voice can help not only help CCP understand the situation, but maybe help us understand the situation. Because I keep coming back to the fact that, like, honestly, half the time it's not an issue with CCP and their design anymore, but whether or not it's communicated in a way that we get it, so that way we can digest it and work with it. And the God honest truth is that the biggest thing that I take away from this conversation is this spreadsheet, or these diagrams. And the reason why they're important to me isn't necessarily even what you're arguing, although true to form, it was a very well formed argument. But I'll tell you this: CCP posted a bunch of spreadsheets. Kenneth, who we also interviewed, is on the CSM, was a big part of it. He said it took him 6 months to really fully digest it, and he talked about it on stage, or on talking stations and stuff like that. There was never a blog that ever explained the high level changes. This right here is one of the best visual representations of understanding of what the hell this even means. And that's the big difference, right? That's the piece of the CSM that I feel is missing, that's able to take like the design and actually digest it for people, so that way we as players can figure out what the hell's going on. And then you can, in that process of trying to work through it with us, can take it back to CCP to fix the pieces that may still be missing. And so I think that like, you got a lot of shit for bringing this presentation, but I think it actually speaks wonders. And like, I need some nerds on the CSM, and I need some dudes to make spreadsheets and presentations and stuff like that. Torvald probably moved the needle on faction warfare, not because he was really excited about it, but because he showed up prepared with a presentation. You showed up prepared to have a presentation. I think that speaks volumes.
I'm going to say, this presentation is a small part of our, like, when the industry patch dropped, we spent a bunch of time doing our own internal analysis, downloading the Sissy SDK, and the volumes thing is just one part of it. We have analysis on basically everything. It's not public since we plan to make money off of it, but it will be public to CCP as part of our advice if we get on the CSM. So to sort of make an argument for my, so am I at my 10 minutes?
No.
Or
go ahead and make your points.
Okay, so basically, if
oh yeah,
in
well
30
yes,
seconds,
we are in the 10-minute period. So I mean, like,
okay.
just make whatever points you need to, and then when we're done, we're done.
So I think the point I'm trying, the focal point, the best selling point I think for my candidacy is that I am the technocrat, so to speak, on the CSM this year. A lot of the other block candidates, they are politicians, leaders, and people who sort of delegate this sort of digging thing to other people within their organization. Now the issue with that is that they do that with the CSM, they break NDA.
Right.
So when they give CCP feedback is feedback from what their core competency is, which is not crunching numbers. My core competency is taking numbers, digesting, and putting it back out in understandable form. And I'll give an example of something we actually discovered when we were doing part of our analysis, which is that the carbon, the reinforced carbon that you talked about, when that blueprint dropped on Sissy, it had there's a behind the scenes cost behind every blueprint that determines the job fee when you put that
Right.
into
Oh
a
yeah,
reaction.
I think I know where you're
Carbon
going with
fiber
this.
was high by about 20 by about 20 fold, and it was never picked up on CCP's internal testing because when Kenneth Feld made his spreadsheet to estimate the final price, he did it with an assumption that the index was 0.5. 0.5 is not a realistic index for anyone doing reactions. And
Right.
the issue is when you take that into a system that has a moderate reaction index of 6, half the price of the Titan ends up being the job cost for the carbon fibers. That's
Whoopsie.
whoopsie, but they didn't catch that before it went live. It went live, and then people found that they were getting reamed on the job cost of carbon fibers and researching all the capital components. And that's sort of something that should have happened beforehand. That should have happened on Sissy, but I'm guessing the forum posts we made during Sissy didn't get read, and well, we didn't have the information beforehand, to sort of provide them with this sort of 5-cent information while this was still being planned. So that patch went live without anyone looking at the final numbers in a realistic context. And that is a task that I hope to be able to do, so that if CCP does another implements more patches that are numerically impaired, let's say, I hope I can catch that and inform them at the earliest stage, so we reduce the chance that something like that comes live in as far as it can. Because we did find out to our detriment that CCP recently have been pushing some patches live without really consulting anyone.
Yeah, that's a whole nother topic. But yeah, it's again, it what strikes me is the fact that you are well. Actually, let me ask one last question before we wrap things up. Then, because so you're a goon. You have you all of the reputation and all of the propaganda involved in that. You're a numbers guy. You want to be on the CSM. Convince me that this is not some sinister plot to get access to the numbers so that way you can get even more rich. Like that like has happened in the past or has been accused as happening in the past.
I mean, if you believe that already, there's probably nothing I can say for you that will convince you otherwise, other than I think I've built a reputation for, if not integrity, then neutrality. So if you read any of the battle reports I write on our Eve, you'll know that I try my best to treat both sides fairly, whether we win or we lose. I've written battle reports where we've lost, battle reports where we stomped, and I I would like to I would like to think that would prove to enough people that I care about the integrity of the game more than my position in Goonswarm or the position of Goonswarm itself. Um, and I mean, if there's other ways to prove it, like cross your heart and whatever, I can say I did that, but doesn't I don't know if it'll convince anyone.
We're on the Molia
Um,
Cemetery. No. No, I mean
but
it is
yeah,
a typical question, and that was that's a fair answer, but it is something that I wanted to give you the opportunity to just address openly, and I think that you made a good point. Like, I mean, being able to say you can see my reports on things. I'm not a stooge. I'm here for the good of the game, and I'm on this side. I think that's a fair and compelling argument. And again, like I think that as a Imperium member, I think that you've established yourself as a beyond just the Imperium vote candidate in a very real and effective way. And if it is true that you also have at least a pretty decent position on the Imperium ballot, then that I think that gives you a very strong position, indeed, in this election. And I think that's a good thing because I think that your voice will be or can be very effective on the CSM. You can, as I said, like I said, we're all so focused on our own trees. There needs to be somebody who sees when the trees come together and have that be their focus as well. And that really seems to be one of the pieces that you dig into a lot, which is an incredibly important insight because, as you pointed out, like the thing is that there's so many different numbers. There's always little tiny mistakes all over the place, and it takes a lot of people to be paying attention and getting in there. And development is also slow, so getting to those numbers early and getting them to them even before they get on Sissy, if you can, is way more effective. Because honestly, once they're on Sissy, it may be a matter of like they can put a ticket in to fix it in a week or two, but it's going live, right? Like, I mean, the dev cycle, the calendar already says it's going up. It's too late
look
to
at the
change certain things.
nullification patch, for example. That was
I
live for
don't
three
wanna.
days on Sissy. Okay, you don't want to? I won't talk about it
I'm
then.
just kidding. I'm just kidding. No, but yeah, but that's my point. Is that like we simultaneously need somebody to be ensuring that all of this stuff is cleaned up as CCP is more aggressive, which I think is actually a good thing, more aggressive versus less. But also it means that we need somebody like you and as many people like you as possible. If we can have you and Kenneth and maybe some others on there, I think that there might be a lot more back and forth and those much longer discussions in the CSM Discord about it all. But ultimately, I think we might avoid some mistakes and build a deeper knowledge base about it. So I look forward to seeing the rest of your candidacy, and I hope you get elected, and I hope that you continue to be part of this stuff because, like I said, And I know that other people have done these kinds of presentations before too, and I don't even know if you stole this from somebody else, but
I made that like 2 hours before the CCP stream
there you
because
go.
I
But
realized I had nothing to present on stream when I said I would.
but my point is that in the world in which like these changes happen and everybody's confused and everybody's talking about it, nobody understands what the situation is. You come out and say, "Hey, here's a diagram," and everybody goes, "Oh, okay," and like that. Ultimately, when it's all said and done, it's what's going to get it done. And I keep asking people, like, how are we going to handle this communication issue? And you already did it. I didn't even ask you. So, good on you for that.
Thank you for the words of encouragement.
Anything else that you want to cover? Anything that we haven't talked about? One last chance.
I think you've been very thorough with what I structured my candidacy around. I guess for fun facts, I speak fluent Mandarin, but this year there is no Chinese candidate. I'm trying to see if I can scoop some of those votes as well. But
Well, that's actually
the
that's a
issue
really
is
important
that
note.
the major Chinese alliances are all kind of shooting us at the moment, so that might get a bit awkward.
Even more important for me to ask the question of why a non-Imperium person would want to vote for you. And I mean, yes, it's going to be that idea of like, well, this is just going to be a goon industrialist that's learning the secrets for the goons. But I mean, I'll put it this way: if that's your conspiracy theory, guess what? They already have their CSM representative. They already have their inside information. If Angry Mustache needed that information, he would have already been able to get it. So to that end, I think that all he's going to be able to do is provide some information for the CSM, hopefully, and and then likewise, all I'm hearing is if I was a member of fraternity, I would start figuring out how to recruit you. That's all.
Oh, thank you.
Anyway, that being said, it was good talking to you. Hopefully we can talk soon. You're a very interesting guy. I'm very glad I caught your CSM interview and got a chance to chat with you. And I look forward to seeing what you got going on in the future.
All right, thank you, Raj, and thank you for having me. This has been actually my favorite out of my like 3 stream appearances so far. So, thank you.
Yeah, well, I mean, like I said, like, as soon as I saw what you were arguing about, I was like simultaneously intrigued because it was my world, but also I was like, I wanted to push back on some of these concepts that you were throwing around, and I'm very pleased with what I found. So, good luck, my friend. 07.